Hello everyone! Since I'm learning four Romance languages, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Italian, I would like to do something that I do actually as a part of my study of these languages, and I would like to compare these four languages, some features in them. I'll start with comparing the tenses, more specifically the form of these tenses, and I'll start by showing the verbs that I'll be using for this comparison. So I'll be using the following verbs. For Spanish, I'll use hablar, to speak, comer, to eat, and vivir, to live. For French, I'll use parler, to speak, finir, to finish, vendre, to sell. For Portuguese, I'll use the verbs falar, to speak, comer, to eat, and partir, to leave. For Italian, I'll use the verbs parlare, to speak, credere, to believe, aprire, to open, and finire, to finish. So, let's start comparing the present tense form in these four languages. I'll start with Spanish. I'll use it as a basis for my comparison. This is a comparison from the point of view of a learner, so let's go. Spanish has three groups of verbs. The first is conjugated as follows. Hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan. If we look at the remaining languages, we can see that the Portuguese conjugation is practically the same. So falo, falas, fala, falamos, falais, falam. The same applies for the second group and the third group of verbs. So the second group is, as we can see, como, comes, come, comemos, comeis, comen. And in Portuguese, como, comes, come, comemos, comeis, comem. And the third group of verbs in Spanish, vivo, vives, vive, vivimos, vivís, viven. And in Portuguese, parto, partes, parti, partimos, partis, partem. As we can see, it's practically the same, only in the plural, third person of plural, there is some slight difference in orthography. I have highlighted the second person plural in both languages, since this is not used in all varieties of the language, and the second person singular for Portuguese as well, since this one is also not used in all varieties of Portuguese. Let's go to Italian, which also has similar forms. So the first group of verbs in Italian is conjugated as follows. Parlo, parli, parla, parliamo, parlate, parlano. Let's compare it with Spanish. As we can see, the first and third person singular have the same endings, the same suffixes. The first and third person plural, we can see similarity with Spanish and Portuguese, with some slight difference. However, there is difference in the second person singular, where Italian has a different ending, and Italian uses the ending I, parli. In the second person plural, Italian uses the ending ate, parlate, which looks a bit similar to, we can feel some similarity with Spanish, but it's more distant. And the second group of Italian verbs, the conjugation is as follows. Credo, credi, crede, crediamo, credete, credono. If we compare it to the second conjugation of Spanish, again, the first and third person plural are the same. Again, similarity in the first and third person plural, crediamo, credono, with comemos, comen. And there is difference in the second person singular, in which Italian has the ending I, credi, and the second person plural, in which Italian has a bit more different ending credete. And in the third group of verbs, Italian has two types of verbs. One type of verbs is conjugated more or less as usual, similarly to other verbs. So it goes as follows. Apro, apri, apre, apriamo, aprite, aprono. But there is one type of verbs which add a syllable, isk, in some persons. So it's represented by the verb finire. And it's as follows. Finisco, finisci, finisce, finiamo, finite, finiscono. As we can see in the whole singular and in the third person plural, this type of verbs adds a syllable, isk. So finisco, finisci, finisce, finiscono. As we can see in the first and third person singular and first and third person plural, this group of verbs also shows similarity to the other two already mentioned languages, Spanish and Portuguese. Apro, apre, finisco, finisce, with ending identical with Spanish and Portuguese. And also the first and the third person plural, which also have very similar endings. Again, the second person singular has a different ending, apri, finisci, and the second person plural has a slightly different ending, aprite, finite. And the last language that I'll mention in this comparison is French, which is the most different from the remaining three, and the conjugation of verbs in French is as follows. The first group of French verbs is conjugated as follows. Parle, 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 parlons, parler, parle. As we could hear, pronunciation in singular is the same for all forms. They differ only in writing, and the pronunciation is the same as in the third person plural. So all these forms are pronounced exactly the same. They differ only in written form. If we look at these verbs in written form, their endings are similar to the second group of Spanish verbs and the second group of Portuguese and Italian. The only difference is in the spelling of the first person singular, where the ending is E in written form in French. In plural, this first group of French verbs has endings which are similar to Spanish or Portuguese, even if the pronunciation is slightly different, in line with the rest of the French language. Parlons, parler, parle. But in writing, we can see that they are similar to the second group in Spanish. The second group of French verbs is conjugated as follows. Fini, 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 finissons, finissez, finissent. So again, all three singular forms are pronounced the same, and in plural, we have a change. As we can see, there is something similar going on here. Like in Italian, there is a syllable added to these verbs, is. Finissons, finissez, finissent. It's not exactly the same like in Italian, but it's a similar feature that we can observe here. And the third group of French verbs is conjugated as follows. Vend, 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 vendons, vendez, vende. As we can see in the second and third group of French verbs, spelling is the same for first and second person singular. Pronunciation is the same for all three persons. In singular, these two groups of French verbs differ only in the spelling of the third person. And the third group of French verbs, again in plural, shows similarities to Spanish and other languages that I already talked about. Vendons, vendez, vende. Again, in the third person plural, the ending is not pronounced. So this was my attempt to compare present tense forms in 4 Romance languages that I'm learning from my personal point of view as a learner. If you have some notes, some important information about verbs in present tense, or some examples, you can write them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again next time. Goodbye.